Hello there, true believers. This is Head Speaks, a proud member of the Headcast Network family of shows. As usual, I am your host, Aaron Moss, aka Head. This is my mostly monthly Headcast, where I talk about comics, movies, role-playing games, TV shows, and anything else geeky that I want. So sit back and enjoy the ride. Let's begin. Hey, true believers. This is Aaron Moss, aka Brother Head, coming at you, and this is episode 46 of Head Speaks. I've got two segments today for you. The first up is
Bitch and moan, bitch and moan, bitch and gripe, gripe and moan, bitch and gripe, bitch and moan, bitch and moan, bitch and gripe.
Brotherheads, bitches, moans, and gripes.
So on today's segment, I'm going to talk a little bit about fanboys and stupidity of them, I guess. Me being a fanboy, I try not to be stupid about it, but as I've talked about before, I'm on a couple of Facebook groups. One of the more prevalent ones I'm on is a Unite DC Comics group, where we talk about DC Comics, the comics, movies, TV show, all of that nonsense. And again, I can be very vocal when I dislike something. I mean, we've had years and years. I mean, before the current Marvel run we had decades of interspaced movies here and there, very once in a while, the occasional TV series. And so we were happy with what we got. But in the last decade or so, a little over a decade, I guess, we've had a plethora of movies, TV shows, animated projects. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, no matter what I complain about, this is a great time to be a comic book geek. I mean, there's so much stuff out there that I don't have time to watch it all, so we can actually pick and choose what we watch. If you don't like something, go ahead and turn it off and turn on something else. There's plenty of shows that I just I like. It's okay, but I have so much stuff to watch that I say Gotham was a decent show. It's got its problems, got some good stuff about it. But I have so much stuff to watch. I've missed the last season and a half of it. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. same way. I missed the last 2 seasons or so, maybe 3 now, because I've got so much stuff. I got behind on it, and I'll catch it at some other point. But my point is, and I've gotten off the main point with this sub-point, but there's so much stuff here that we have a lot to choose from. But the flip side of that we have so much to choose from, is that unlike back with the rubber masked, rubber-eared Captain America of the 90s and the Punisher of No Skull with, what's his name, the Russian from Rocky IV, we don't have to accept everything that comes out at us. And as a geek, I don't accept everything that's, this is great because it's a comic book thing and it's coming at us no matter what it is. If I see something I don't like, I will complain about it. And if I don't care for it enough, I'll stop watching, or I will, I'm not going to keep watching something just to watch it because I have nothing else to watch. I say we have so much stuff that we can be choosy. But there are some things, like, for instance, I've complained about this before, and I'll complain about it again, the Titans on the CW app. I love the Wolfman Perez Titans. That's a fantastic book. I love that. I thought they did a great job on it. I mean, there at the end, it got kind of bad. But Marv Wolfman's famously known for having a writer's block at that point and having problems. So, but before that was awesome. I would say the first 100 or so issues of the New Teen Titans, which became the New Titans, and the series before that was just fantastic. So when the Titans TV show came out, I was up for that. And as I've complained before, I dislike it. There's a lot of problems. Starfire, Changeling. Oh my God, Dove is horrible. I mean, the costume looks pretty good, except for, again, they're following that DC cinematic route and everything's a little dark and grim and gritty, and Dove's not that type of character. But I'm not here to complain about Dove right now. My point is, when I complain about these things on Facebook, you get people that they have nothing better to do than complain the fact that you're complaining about this. Well, imagine, you're such a geek that you have to complain about this TV show. Like I said, if to them, you're so bad off that you have to complain about me complaining about a TV show. Fanboys can be our own worst enemy. Look at the whole Star Wars debacle. I mean, the last couple Star Wars movies haven't done as good. I think they've been decent movies. But a lot of fanboys have complained. And again, I'm sure they're not the same fanboys, but you get a segment of fanboys complain when George Lucas did episodes 1, 2, and 3. Oh my God, George Lucas ruined Star Wars. Again, episodes 1, 2, 3 weren't perfect, but they were decent for what he was trying to do, I think. But yeah, you get fanboys saying, oh, you ruined Star Wars, giving up George Lucas. So George Lucas sells Star Wars to Disney. Disney comes out with episode 7, 8, the Han Solo movie, a couple others, and people complain about them. Oh, we'll give it back to George Lucas, you're ruining Disney. How can they ruin something that's already been ruined, according to fanboys? They complain about, I was just on a post recently about complaining about Luke Skywalker acting out of character in episode 8. Oh, he threw away his father's lightsaber, and he was about ready to kill an innocent for no reason, and yeah, Luke Skywalker threw away his father's lightsaber. Like I said to that guy, apparently my sarcasm was lost on him. Yeah, Luke Skywalker threw away his father's lightsaber. I mean, this the same father he had such a close, intimate relationship with for all these years. He honored his father. He thought his father was a great man. No, his father was Darth Vader. The lightsaber didn't mean a lot to him. And as far as almost killing an innocent boy, it was a brief thought he had because he saw his nephew going down the dark side route, the same route he's fallen on temporarily. And yes, in case you didn't miss it, part of Star Wars, well, it's not part of the continuity anymore, I guess, but previous Star Wars continuity, there was Dark Empire where Luke fell to the dark side for a brief moment. So saying that, Luke Skywalker giving up on the Force and hiding away and throwing away his father's lightsaber and pondering killing Ben Solo for a moment is out of character. I don't think you know the character that well. But again, I'm not caring about the fact that, well, I am, and I've started away from my main point again about fans. Again, my main complaint about this is geeks complaining about other geeks complaining about stuff. Again, that's what we do. And I know I'm being kind of, I don't know if it's hypocritical or what, that I'm complaining about the Star Wars fan complaining about Star Wars. But since this is my podcast, I guess I get to do that. Complain about complainers and then complain about people complaining. I don't know. Anyway, my point is that, and again, this segment's kind of all over the place, I guess. I do want to complain about, well, I say people going on Facebook to complain about me complaining about people just because, well, again, we're in an era where we don't have to accept everything that's thrown at us. We can be a little critical about these things. And again, I complain about Titans because I love them so much. I love that George Perez run, as I talked about, the Marv Wolfman George Perez run. So when they do something wrong, I've got to go on Facebook and complain about it. But there's a difference in complaining about what you think is wrong. I mean, if other people are enjoying that show, fantastic. I'm happy for you. I wish I could enjoy it because, again, I love the Titans, as I've said. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm going to release a episode of Task Force X this month where I talk about the Suicide Squad movie, and I'll have some points in that. Because, again, Suicide Squad's another book I loved. But I don't know. Going on to Facebook and complaining about not really complaining, but saying how they don't like what they don't like about something, giving valid arguments, it seems kind of hypocritical to me. And I know I was just complaining about Star Wars fans that complained about the Star Wars movies, but and again, maybe it's just different because I'm from a different point of view, and I enjoyed the Star Wars movies to an extent. And so maybe that's where I'm coming from. But I think I've lost my path with this rant. not quite sure I'm going with it at this point. So I'm going to probably end it here pretty soon, just because I think I got kind of off track with my ranting about something else. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that we are in an enlightened area where we can complain? Not complain. Again, I say complain. But yeah, we can make some slight complaints about these shows that we love or these properties that we love when we think that they're doing it wrong. But there's I don't want to say a limit per se, but when you start demanding, a boycott on something, I think that's beyond the line. I mean, if someone wants to enjoy, if I want to enjoy Star Wars, I can enjoy it. If someone wants to enjoy the Titans, that's fine. And if you want to complain about something, do it productively. Don't just, and do it consistently, I guess. Don't make up, like I said, the Star Wars one I was complaining about earlier. Guy complaining that, Luke Skywalker is acting out of character. Watch all the movies and see if he's acting out of character. I'm complaining about the Titans TV show when I do complain about that because it's not, again, it's consistent, I guess, with the TV show that they're doing, but Dove's not consistent with the character from the comic. Starfire's not consistent with the looks of the character in the comic, and that's what I'm complaining about. And I guess that may be a complaint for a different show, the fact that these studios changed some of these characters so much. But we'll talk about that later. Again, I've got kind of off track of my original rant. I'm all over the place with this, but that's what happens when I actually have a script. I'm just coming off the head. I've got my basic idea what I want to talk about, and as I'm talking, I come up with other ideas and things just flow out. So, what do you guys think? Am I crazy? Should I shut up? Let me know. Send me feedback at headspeaks.com. We've been in this for about 10-12 minutes. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our next segment. Head Speaks will be back after these important messages.
Xenozoic Xenophiles,
a fan podcast devoted to the comic series Xenozoic Tales.
It's a post-apocalyptic adventure series filled with Cadillacs and dinosaurs.
I'm Ruth.
And I'm Darren.
We hope you'll join us as we discuss the stories, characters, and art in this excellent comic series from creator, writer, and artist Mark Schultz.
Xenozoic Xenophiles is available at podbean.com and on iTunes and Stitcher.
And find us at xenozoicxenophiles.com.
Hey, true believers, this is Aaron Moss, aka Brotherhead, and I'm letting you know I've got a whole network of shows out there. It's called the Headcast Network, and on this network I have a whole bunch of shows that you may just enjoy. My primary show is Head Speaks. That's where I talk about comics, TV shows, movies, books, whatever I feel like talking about that month. Again, I am a big geek, so it's going to be geek-oriented, for the most part. Then I have G.I. A Real American Headcast. That's where me and several other guys get together and talk about the G.I. Joe comic book series from the 80s, which lasted through the 90s and then was recently restarted with IDW in the 2000s, and also the G.I. Joe A Real American Hero cartoon from the 80s. Great times. I also have Task Force X, where I talk about the Suicide Squad and the Checkmate comics from the late 80s, early 90s. And my final show on the network at this point is the Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, where I look at the Will Payton Starman and the Mark Shaw Manhunter comics, again from the late 80s, early 90s, kind of tight. Come join us, check out the fun. I've also got some other shows planned. I may be doing a Heroes Unlimited role-playing podcast, And I've also got another secondary G.I. Joe show coming out called Bravo Team, where I look at other G.I. Joe related items. My shows are available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from. Come, check them out.
Hi, John.
Hi, Maggie.
I'm still wrapping my brain around the fact that we're married.
Me too, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Aw.
Well, hey, I was looking at these old comics and I noticed that there's
Hold
a
that thought. Why don't we talk about it on our podcast?
We have a podcast?
It seems like the logical next step. We get married, we change our names, we combine our comic collections, we start a podcast about comic books.
Well, I can't fault your logic, but there are plenty of podcasts out there already. Do you really think we'll have anything new and interesting to say?
Oh, I think we'll manage. Welcome to the Married with Comics podcast, where we constantly up.
It goes from Marvel Girl to Phoenix to Marvel Girl to Jean Grey to Phoenix to Dead.
And then apparently he's so consumed with his own thoughts that he runs right past 3 monkeys in the alleyway. A brainwave camera took a picture of that guy's head. A brainwave camera.
And Ben's just basically, whatever you gotta do to stop the commies, Nick.
So join us at the Married with Comics podcast, where two newlyweds with a love for comics intelligently, critically, and thoughtfully discuss comic books.
Also listen as we goof around, make jokes, and make fun of John for mispronouncing names.
I do that a lot.
Sometimes we'll pick a topic and review and discuss comics that relate to the topic.
And sometimes we'll pick up a comic and see what discussion topics come up. And sometimes we'll spend an entire episode talking about how much Maggie loves Batman.
The only thing that's almost as strong as my love for you is my love for Batman.
The Married with Comics podcast. Available directly on our site at marriedwcomics.libsyn.com, on iTunes, and wherever good podcasts are found. Also, check us out at Facebook at the Married with Comics podcast.
We've got everything you need.
And now back to Head Speaks. Welcome back. And now let's take a look at our next segment.
Faster than a speeding bullet.
In the great hall of the Justice League,
Spider-Man and his amazing friends.
the Justice League of America versus the Legion of Doom. This is
What's in Head's Long Box?
Dedicated to truth, justice, and peace for all mankind. The world's greatest super friends.
And welcome to this segment of What's in Head's Long Box. We're continuing our look at the Armageddon 2001 mega crossover. We're nearing the end, but not quite there yet. And back with me this month, I have another special guest, first time for my podcast. From the Fanholes Podcast, we have Derek W.C.
Hey, Derek. Hey, what's up? How's it going, Aaron? Pleasure to be here. Pleasure
to finally talk to you guys. I've been listening to your shows, and we've been listening for quite a while now, and I realized, it's the first time I'm actually talking to him.
Cool.
In person,
that's
actually.
Great. That's great. No, it's fun. It's fun listening to the Armageddon 2001 coverage, because I think that's something I'm a mark for. So it's fun listening to you cover this stuff. So when you mentioned this, I was like, oh, and I don't know. I mean, I guess revealing the hand, I don't get to talk about Legion all that much in my various venues. So I was like, this is kind of going to be fun, because it's something I don't normally get to talk about at all. So.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I had somebody else lined up, but at the last minute, he's like, I'm kind of out of comics right now. I'm burned out. I'm
just not feeling it right now. I'm sorry. I'm like, that's fine. I understand. You know, we've all been there at one point or another. And so I put my feelers out, and so I'm glad you volunteered for this. Gives me someone else to talk to, and like I said, I finally get to talk to you after all this time. So, so speaking of Armageddon 2001, so is this your first time reading it? Have you read it before?
I've read it before. I was reading Armageddon 2001 when it was hitting the comic shops. Like, I think by this point I had officially, 91, I had officially discovered comic book specialty shops. I may have trying to cleverly get, sold out comic issues. I may have gone to a spinner rack here and there, or, a Walden Books or something like that. But for the most part, I was going to comic specialty shops on a regular basis, and I was, entrenched in the comic book marketing, megalith of event crossovers. So I pretty much bought all of these annuals and was, following along with the story with bated breath. I mean, the only thing I can say about the background to this is that I was trying to think, like, when I first read an issue of Legion, and I think it was probably a couple months before this. Like, I think my first issue of Legion was issue 29, and I'm going to be completely upfront and honest. Like, the reason why I started following Legion was because of Lobo's, like, extreme popularity in 1990. Like, I read that Lobo miniseries, and then, like, everybody and their brother was into Lobo, and I kind of went along with the, the hype and the fandom and all that stuff. And sort of, I think when I discovered that Lobo was a regular team member of Legion, then I started picking up the ongoing book, and I sought out a lot of back issues from that point, moving forward. But at this point, I mean, the Armageddon 2001 crossover was in full swing. I had bought, all the tie-ins up to that point, and I was definitely following the storyline. So I had some familiarity with the characters, but this probably maybe was my third or fourth issue of Legion, like, at this point that I had, looked at, I guess.
But you said you went back and bought all the issues, or?
Well, not all of them. Like I said, I was in for the Lobo hype. So, like, I was looking through like Mike's Amazing World for all the covers, like, trying to jog my memory and everything. And, like, I can see my pattern, because I was like, oh, this cover has a Lobo on it. This cover has Lobo on it. So, like, I remembered buying, like, issues 4 and issue 5, like, covers that specifically sort of featured Lobo. And then I think by that point, the ongoing title, I probably bought it from, like, 29 on, and then I probably dipped in and out depending on my level of interest. Like, I can see, like, where after Armageddon 2001, I followed it pretty faithfully for a while, and then I sort of lost interest in between Armageddon 2001 and Eclipso, and then I can see the same thing again, where I can recognize covers of things that I bought, where I was like, oh, look, there's, a cover with Superman or Green Lantern. So I can see that I would pick those up, or I was, by the end of the series, it was 0 Hour was the big event. And I remember I picked up a few issues because they sort of tied into the actual Legion of Superheroes at the time, and then all the stuff with Phase. So, like, I can kind of see, like, where I was like, oh, I can sort of track my progress. So I don't know if it was, like, super consistent, but I mean, I did buy it on a month-to-month basis for, maybe like 5 to 6 months at a time, and then maybe I would kind of get distracted by the next new shiny thing, or maybe there wasn't enough Lobo in it for me or something like that, and I moved on to other things. But I would occasionally come back to it depending on my level of interest.
Right. I started collecting. Invasion was the first crossovers around for, so I was full deep. I picked up this book when it came out and bought every single issue, and because I have a problem. But that's another story entirely.
No, because it's like, I think also the other thing was this was a direct market book too. So I think when Invasion launched, I was kind of deep into that as well. But I think some of the spin-off titles, I probably hadn't quite discovered comic specialty shops in 88. Like, so some of the things that some of the books that sprung out of Invasion, I just I had never seen Legion until I went to a comic specialty shop, and by then I think the thing that enticed me to check it out was, like I said, I was just gonna be honest, but it was totally Lobo. Like that's the main reason why I was buying the book at the time.
Oh, that's what these characters are thrown in for, is to get people to, hey, here's Lobo. Oh, let me check this out. And some people stick with it, and some, will just dip in and out like yourself. So that's not a problem at all. That's what Lobo's there for, is to draw people in and get people interested in that, may not otherwise want to check it out. They'll be willing to check it out because Lobo's in it. So anyway, we're here to talk about the Legion 91, annual number 2. I'm going to go over and give the quick covers, or the credits for it real quick, and the synopsis. The cover date we've been talking about is 1991. The on sale date was July 16th, 1991. The cover price was $2.95. The title of this issue was called 2001. Written by Alan Grant. Penciler is Mike McKeown. Penciler Jan Harps. Letterer was Gasper Saldino. Colorist was Laverne Kindersky or something like that. Terrible at names. Editor Dan Raspler. And the cover was done by Mike McKeown and Jan Harps. And the synopsis for this issue, the credits all came from Mike's Amazing World of Comics. It's a great site. Check them out. Mike does a fantastic job. But the synopsis is as follows. Our story starts out with, Derek's favorite, Lobo, and Telepath holding court with a bunch of creeps on behalf of the Legion. Telepath reads their minds and finds out they're all guilty. Lobo demands they all fight him to the death. Once he's killed all 10 defendants, in quotes, he knows there's another person in the room. As he confronts Waverider, our hero freezes time as he investigates Lobo's future. 10 years into the future, he finds Lobo still holding court and killing people. Realizing that Lobo isn't his man, he heads out to find the one that controls Lobo, Viral Dox. As he heads towards Legion HQ, he recaps his mission to find Monarch. In Legion HQ, Waverider zooms past the rest of the Legion to head to Viral's lab, where he's locked himself in, working on an experiment. As Waverider makes to touch Viral, he finds himself captured in an energy band. Viral informs Waverider that after he left Lobo, Telepath warned Viral about the intruder. He demands to know what Waverider is doing. Waverider explains his mission, and Viral allows him to touch him. In 10 years, we see the Legion become a Gestapo. As his goons try to capture the protesters, a couple of former Legionnaires, Strata and Garv, cause a disturbance, allowing some of the protesters to flee. Back on Karen, FaZe and Garen gives a little backstory. At some point, Viral lost interest in justice and started seeking power. The first to go was Lobo, who is in a containment chamber. We then go to an unnamed planet, where we find Stealth and her son are living their life when they get a call from Strata asking for a meet. Back on Karen, FaZe and Garen go up against Viral's enforcer, Cybo. Viral and his mates, Lady Quark, fire FaZe and Garen. As the would-be rulers leave, FaZe overhears them talking about how soon the entire galactic spiral arm will be under their control. Elsewhere, Captain Comet and his wife, Margin, something like that, arrives incognito while Comet reveals himself, stopping some stick-up thugs. Then they meet up with Telepath on the way to meet with Garv. Also on the way are FaZe and Garen. Meanwhile, we see Dox use his experiments on a couple of brainwashed citizens. The device combines the two of them into one monstrous creature. We then learn that they plan on using the device on themselves and one other. Then they go to where Waverider is still in prison and gloat how one more day his secret will be theirs. Meanwhile, our former Legionnaires meet up. Stealth has Telepath look into Dox's mind to see what he has planned. They find out the experiment is scheduled for tomorrow. Also, the computer tyrants of Kulu have taken up residence in Doc's mind. Before our heroes can do anything, Cybo and a legion of Legion troopers show up and reenact the shootout at the OK Corral. In the shootout, Mergen, Telepath, Garv, and Little Rocky, which is Garv and Strata's child, die. Also, Cybo eats it. The remaining team then invades Legion HQ, while Dox and Lady Quark use the machine on themselves. As the team moves through the building, Garden frees Lobo from his status chamber, who then begins beating on Garden for making faces at him for years. Garden convinces Lobo to hold off on beating him and a chance to get even with Viral Dox. The team finds out the Dox Quartet tyrant creature. After a few pages of fighting, the Dox creature takes out our heroes and goes to confront Waverider. We then get some exposition about how we got to this point. Dox and Quark figured out how to use the Waverider to travel to the past. They went back to Taluk 8 to make sure the computer tyrants were truly dead. There, the tyrants took control of Dox and Lady Quark, which leads us to this point, where somehow the Dox creature absorbed Waverider and flies off to become the master of space and time. Back in the present, Waverider convinces Dox to free him to protect Vril from becoming something worse than Monarch. Waverider flies off to continue his journey, while Dox tells him to come back and join the team when he's done. The end. So let's go ahead and start with the cover of this one. The cover of this issue shows Waverider in the background. He's got his hands up, assuming in the cage that Vril had him in. In front of him, we see Lobo on top of a pile of weapons and his fellow Legionnaires. Off to either side, we see Cybo and Vril off either side of him in black and white. So, Derek, what are your thoughts on this cover?
I really like the way the cover's laid out. Like, I like how everyone's positioned. I think it pretty much shows, at least in some sense, like the content of the issue you're about to read. Like, you can tell that there's going to be some, I mean, it's a little bit of a misdirection, right? Because they sort of want you to think Waverider's gonna make contact with Lobo and try to view into his future, and his future may entail, Lobo basically, it kind of reminds me of the whole, Punisher kills the Marvel universe or something like that. It's like in this case, and they actually did do a version of that in Lobo's ongoing later, where it was like Lobo, kills the DC universe or whatever. But it's kind of like a precursor to that, and in this case, It's just his fellow, Legion teammates that he's, quote unquote, killing the universe of. But I think the way it's laid out looks really cool. I mean, the only, and I like the art. I like Mike McKone. I think I know him best from the work on Teen Titans, like Johns' Teen Titans in the early 2000s. And then I did meet him once at a San Jose Big Wow, so I got him to sign my Titans promo poster or whatever. But nice. I do like the way the art's laid out. I like how, they've got, Cybo and Dox in the background and everything, and they do a good job of sort of isolating with color, like all the different characters in the wreckage. The only thing I kind of question, like, I see why they did it. Like, I think that the colors pop on the characters themselves, so you can kind of make them out within the wreckage. But, like, for some reason, the wreckage looks a little too uniform to me. Like, so, and I get why they did that, but I wonder if there was, like, some other way to still give the wreckage some kind of maybe shading. Like it could be the same color, but it just kind of looks so uniform to me. So that's the only criticism I have. But otherwise, I think it's actually a really excellent cover.
Yeah, I like this cover also. I think it's a really good cover. There was something about it that was a little off. I think that's maybe what it is the uniformity of the wreckage. Yeah, I couldn't quite put my finger on until you mentioned it, but
well, because it's like you see how they have like that orange stripe going down the center. It's like, imagine if that was just flat. Like, and the reason why it's not flat is because Waverider's yellow would just blend in with that stripe. So it's like on Lobo, it's yellow, like Waverider's body is yellow, but as it goes up, it kind of has that, increased, I guess,
granular or whatever.
Yeah, it's slowly kind of the color contrast like slowly increases so that it's darker and darker, and it technically by the time you get to the top of it, it's almost red. Like it's kind of like a really, really dark blood red orange. And like maybe there was a way to do something like that with the wreckage where it's like it has that sort of light blue at the top, but it maybe more the way Lobo's chain handle is colored, like how there's different variations of the blue within it. Like maybe if they had done something like that, it would have a more, I don't know, kind of three-dimensional look to it rather than a flat look. But other than that, like I really like it. I mean, you asked about like ratings and stuff. I would give this cover maybe a 4.5 out of 5. Like I think it's good. I just think there's a couple little things here and there, but otherwise I think it's pretty great.
Very good. Now myself, I'd probably give about a 4. Because again, yeah, it's not perfect, but yeah, it's a really good cover. It's one of the better covers for this crossover. So yeah, can't really complain about it at all. I mean, a few better little nitpicks as you talked about, but other than that, yeah, it's a really good cover. So let's go ahead and move on to the actual story itself. I'll go ahead and let you start since you're the guest. What are your thoughts on this issue?
I think it's a pretty good story. Like, I sort of forgot how grim dark it gets, like, because, obviously I guess they have the freedom since they're dealing with a a quote unquote alternate future, and they know it's never going to come to pass because of the nature of the ending. It's like Doc's kind of sees his own future and then dismantles the time equipment at the end, and essentially like he kind of begrudgingly does it, like it's not like he's, because first he's Doc's is an arrogant character, but he's also very self-assured, so like he kind of has this consternation at the end where he's like, well, maybe now that I know, I could do it right this time, like I could still like take control of the universe, but not become a monster, or whatever. Like maybe I can do it in a good way now, but then he kind of ultimately comes to the conclusion like, no, he's not so arrogant and self-assured that he's cold-hearted. So like, I think he wants to avert a future that is that tragic and kind of bloody, I guess. And that's kind of the thing that I noticed about it, because I think like some of the key bits for me were when you slowly start realizing, like, Cybo is a character that is just introduced for this future. So he's kind of, that's something that you notice, his kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, his right-hand man who's leading his kind of Gestapo version of the Legion police. Right. Like they're kind of all, attacking, protesters and different things like that. And you see they kind of make, it's interesting because the Legion is supposed to be like this intergalactic police force, but yet they're always kind of, because eventually they had the Rebels series and all that stuff. So it's like, it seems like the dynamic within, probably, I'm just guessing, with the creative forces involved, they're hesitant to, I guess, make, authority figures completely heroic in some sense, and you always want to like root for the underdog. So it's like they're always finding ways of making the members of the organization the underdog. So that's why you've got like Strata and Garv amongst the protesters, and then you see that they're, quote unquote, indoctrinating all these dissident citizens. And like that kind of reminded me of like Clockwork Orange, like, when they have got like, Alex in the little, re-education box, and they were like peeling his eyes open and making him watch all these videos and everything. Like kind of like when they're sort of torturing these people, and like they're in those little bubbles, and the guy's like screaming as he's being re-indoctrinated. So it's like, it's not precisely like that, but I mean it does have that vibe of the kind of Kubrick version of A Clockwork Orange. And then the other thing that kind of keyed in for me that made it really disturbing is this aspect of the fusion experiments that they're doing, and like that like was full on kind of like Reanimator stuff. Like it was really creepy. Like the experiment that they do, like it kind of like is just all these jumbled faces and fingers, and it's very, very disturbing. And then when they finally all merge together, like with the computer tyrants, like that's even weirder, because they've got like hands that are made of faces, and faces like and fingers that are arms, and it's like they took and like earlobes coming out of elbows. Like it's all kind of pretty much like ass backward, and it's very disturbing.
Yeah, I was just flipping to that page here where they show the Lobo, or not the Lobo, the Vril Quark tyrant monster thing, and yeah, that is rather disturbing looking.
Yeah, I mean that's the only comparison I could think of was like something out of the Reanimator. Like I mean it really does look like it was, if not inspired, like that's something that comes to mind where you're like, oh, this is just a really sort of perverse image, like because it feels like, I mean, it visually on the page, I guess the insinuation is it's unnatural and an abomination, but they never come out and say that. It's all done visually, and it's almost like it feels wrong, and you absolutely positively, the I guess morals of this Kolu Tyrant stuff is just totally wrong.
Much like, I really enjoyed this story. One thing I forgot to mention on the cover, the title of this actual issue, instead of Legion 91 at the time, they changed it to Legion 01 to match the actual book. I did like that. Yeah, and I do like they say they started on Lobo. And again, I like it. Lobo, when they start out, he's just sitting there and playing judge, jury, and executioner. And 10 years in the future, until Vril changes things, he's still sitting there playing judge, jury, and executioner. He's not like doesn't have really plans for his life other than just killing people.
Yeah, Lobo does not have a 5-year plan, much less a 10-year plan, right? Like that's kind of what that's supposed to impart you with the information that he's not a. Well, they even say, like, it's like, oh, he's, I'm talking to the dog. I need to talk to the master, right. Like, because the dog's not going to affect the future that much. The dog just, wakes up, does its business, eats food, goes to sleep, right? Like, that's kind of how Lobo is in this context.
Also, it was interesting that Lobo, his tracking sense was able to tell him that Waverider was there.
Yeah.
Because to most people, he's either they can't tell he's there, or maybe like Superman, a few other sensed him after he's touched him. But yeah, Lobo's like, well,
I think even early in his early appearances, Lobo always had that kind of fan aura aspect to his abilities. Like, I remember thinking of things like if somebody like Darkstar tried to use her shadow powers on him, he would just be unfazed by it. Right. Like most things that would affect people. Kind of like how sometimes they give the Joker a fan aura, where it's like the Scarecrow's fear gas just doesn't work on him. He thinks it tastes yummy or something. It's like most people, they'd be screaming and howling in terror, and you get the vibe that most people are unable to sense Waverider, but for some reason Lobo's senses have that sort of heightened fan aura where he sort of detects him right before he makes contact with him.
Yeah, no, that was a nice touch. It showed, how powerful Lobo was supposed to be. But as you said, he's just a dog. He doesn't really have his own direction to go into. He just does what he's told. Again, I like on page 8 when they're flashing back, forward, whatever, to show Monarch fighting the heroes. We get Swamp Thing back there. We get the Outsiders. We get a few teams that we didn't show in annuals because they didn't have their own book. Or, like I say, at this point, I think Swamp Thing had moved out of DC Universe and was probably, I think Vertigo had started by now or was in the process
I think at the very least he was, because by 91 he was probably considered a mature reader's DC title, but it hadn't quite graduated to Vertigo yet. So, but I think even when they were doing those mature reader books, like, it was funny, I was just having a conversation about this yesterday, but like I think it's like that notion that, like, Sandman and all those books, Doom Patrol were DC books, and then they were DC mature readers books, and then they sort of became absorbed by the Vertigo imprint. So I think this is at that point where I think Rick Veitch was writing Swamp Thing, and then it was kind of like considered a mature reader's book, but it wasn't quite like full blown Vertigo yet.
Okay, because I forgot when. I remember Vertigo starting. I wasn't a huge fan. I read The Animal Man. I read Doom Patrol until it got too weird. Swamp Thing on and off. But
it is kind of interesting because it's like in this background, it's almost like you got the Mike Grell Green Arrow and Animal Man and Swamp Thing, and those were all kind of the mature reader label books. But then, like, a lot of these guys surrounding him, like Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Captain Atom, Batman, like Flash, they were all kind of your, standard, mom and pop, all ages type books or whatever. And then I think it is kind of ironic that, Captain Atom is right there, like given the intent or the original intent, and then also the irony that I do not see Hawk anywhere in this image. So that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, neither Hawk nor Dove. So I wonder if the writers of the books at the time knew who was going to be Monarch, or what they were told, other than your character's not going to be Monarch, write a story about it.
Because the whole apocryphal thing about, that got leaked and then they changed it. Like,
right.
You have to wonder twofold. Like, one, did they know who Monarch was going to be when they were writing this? Like, basically, did Alan Grant and or Mike McKone know that Monarch was intended to be Captain Atom? And then did they know at this point that it was leaked and then they purposely maybe that wasn't originally Captain Atom and it was somebody else in that image and they redrew it to be, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
like what if they knew about knowing, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think that happened because I think my understanding the change came after near the very end.
Oh, okay.
Is my understanding is, that it wasn't like ahead of time. It was during the actual while the ending was coming out. Was my understanding.
Oh, okay.
And it was a last minute substitution type thing. I could be mistaken on that, but that's what I understood. And again, reading the Hawk and Dove annual kind of goes along with that also.
Well, then this image is a total red herring then.
Yes. I didn't even think about Captain Atom being there. I was just. I
suppose his younger self could oppose his older self, but that's
But as I'll talk about in the last issue, we'll talk about later on. He still could have been there, but that's another story entirely. But yeah, thanks overall. I did, like you said, these are good ways of telling a one-off. This is a possible future. This could happen. Let's take it to the extreme and go as wild. And some of them kept it kind of standard, and others took it to the very far extreme, and to see how wacky or how far out there could go with it. So
yeah, I mean, this is the dystopian, terrible future turned up to 11 for sure. I mean, everyone dies. The right. Bad guy wins. Like this is, and there's some really, really brutal deaths too. I mean, I think my favorite one is when, I mean, the two that are really, really impactful, I think, is when Cybo takes out Garv. Like that's like you feel horrible. Like it's ignominious and it's like that kind of, I don't know, Negan taking somebody out on The Walking Dead. Like it makes you feel horrible. Like when that happens to that guy, and it's like, and he's calling out to his wife just as he gets killed. Like to me, it's really, really tragic. And then of course it completely justifies Captain Comet smashing him through the building and impaling him. Like, because at that point you're like, I mean, even if you had a staunch moral code against killing and you don't believe in it, no matter what, I think Strata's husband, Garv getting killed like that, totally puts you on Captain Comet's side for what he does, and you certainly don't hold it against him at that point, no matter what, because it's this kind of just something you can't come back from at this point, and it is kind of like this. Just really atrocious, it's kind of like, the Days of Future Past or any of those kind of dystopian, horrible futures where everybody's just straight up getting, executed and killed, and it's, it's really, really horrible. I guess the saving grace of that is that this clearly is not something that's set in stone. The characters can recover from this. It's like they took out the toys out of the toy box. They totally wrecked the toys and broke the toys, but then they had a magic trick to undo all the breakage by the end.
Yeah, it's something like out of Game of Thrones, or where everyone just gets killed off. Hell, let's kill them all off.
Yeah.
Beyond that, where you were talking about where Cybo dies, I like that there at the bottom of page 42, where we see Cybo laying there dead, and then below that they show various members of the Legion dead. There's blood splattered on the wall. We get Captain Comet holding his wife. We get Strata crying. It's just that's a very moving page, I think.
Yeah, and there's no dialogue needed, I think.
Right.
Also, and what's interesting about it is this is technically a code-approved book, and the way they get away with the level of violence, I think, is, and it kind of reminds me of the difference between the Watchmen comic and the Watchmen film, where the violence, I think, is usually made subtle, not in the art itself, but by the colorist. Because It's like you see him impaled, but yet it's not as gory and or violent so that it wouldn't be code approved. It's a subtle way that the coloring is all sort of dark blues, so it sort of negates the gore, but yet the background is red, so it also emphasizes what just happened. So you still get the full impact of it, but it's not violent to the point where it becomes, I guess non-code approved, so I was like, I don't know. I think that's interesting. Sometimes you can come up with really great art within constraints sometimes, like sometimes it comes out comes out the better for it. So it's not just, I don't know, obnoxious kind of like HBO Spawn type violence and gore, it's a little more subtle than that. And I do appreciate that page. I mean, I think it's a very strong and powerful page. It's probably the best page in the whole annual.
And I've heard other writers and artists talk about ways to get around the codes, like say, instead of making the blood red, make it dark black or dark blue or something. And I've heard some people say that, trying to get around the code to prove, so it's proof for code actually makes the story better sometimes because we come with either a more interesting way or sometimes, I forget who it was now, one writer saying how he came out the way he ended up doing it was actually came out to be more, not just a traumatic, it came out more powerful, more gruesome.
Because of what you don't see, right?
Yeah.
Like your imagination runs wild, and then it becomes even more, more impactful on the reader than it would have had you shown the actual event on the panel, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, he talked about in the synopsis when Lobo gets freed and he starts beating the heck out of
Garen.
Yeah, Garen. And he's like, hold on. Don't you want to get Lobo, or don't you want to get Vril for pinning you in here? I do owe him. Wait right there. I'll be right back. I thought it was a very nice touch, very Lobo-like, someone did it wrong. Yeah. So, you know what? He's going to get his revenge, and I'll come back and continue beating on you for making fun of him.
It's like you only made funny faces at me. Like, I want the guy who actually locked me up in there so you could make funny faces at me. Like, that's the level of priority.
Yeah. And then page 11, that image of the merger of all of them that you were talking about. Yeah, we got a giant hand coming out of their torso, forming them, and he's holding both Lady Quark and Vril's heads in his hands. I guess their heads is merged into their hand or whatever. That's a very weird looking creature. Very disturbing looking.
Yeah.
But I said there's more of the battle. But yeah, it was just a great annual. Like I said, and there are minor quibbles here and there, I'm sure, but overall, yeah, this was one of the better annuals. Because I say, some they did a good job at it. Some were just here's they just threw something out at them. And this doesn't, other than the opening and closing narrative, it doesn't really have much to do with anything with Monarch. Monarch doesn't show up in it. There's no.
I was going to ask, do you think that's the reason why this is like a really good one? Because it turns out like that it doesn't technically have anything to do with Monarch. Like they just kind of told their own like dystopian future story, or do you feel like you're not getting what you paid for because it's got that Armageddon 2001 logo slapped on it, and you wanted more than just Waverider at the beginning and end of the story?
In most of the books, I would say yes to that I'd want more Monarch. I'd want more, but seeing how this is set in space, and like I said, we don't know how far Monarch's reign goes. If it's just on Earth or he's gone beyond Earth. So I could, this one here gets a pass and for not showing anything on Earth at this time. Cause and Vril doesn't become Monarch. He's not involved with Earth at this point. So yeah, it doesn't bother me in this one that there's no Monarch shown in the future. Like I say, some of the other ones where it's on Earth and you would expect Monarch to be there. Yeah, some of those are like the Flash one, for instance. There's nothing to do with Monarch. That one there I was a little more disappointed in because it's on Earth. It's supposed to be 10 years. Monarch should be a presence here, but he's not. But yeah, I think this one gets a pass just because it's like I say, it's so far from Earth, and it is a tie-in because Waverider's looking into their future, but yeah, since they're not on Earth, Monarch's not really playing a part in the story. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I think I was fine with it for the reasons that you're giving. The fact that, I don't think all these futures were intended to line up in any way either, given, the nature of Batman and Superman annuals, the way it was like always different every time he met one of them, because the main goal of it was a monetary goal, right? It was to slap that label on every annual they had in the line out at the time. And then their way to get around that, it's like, well, why would you touch Superman more than once? Well, things have changed in between now and then, so I'm going to touch you just one more time just to be sure. And oh yeah, since Superman has 3 titles, I'm going to touch you just one more time after that, just to be sure. And since Batman has 2 titles, like, we're going to touch him twice, just to be on the safe side. But everybody else gets touched once, because they only have the one annual. And it's like, that's, I went along with it at the time, because, I think I was more, this was an era, and I kind of say this a lot, but this was still within an era where I was willing to sort of go along with the program. If someone gave me a given statement, I just kind of nodded my head, and I could suspend disbelief given that given statement that, like, yeah, Waverider's checking origins and futures and things like that, and yeah, he's got to touch these guys a few times, but he's just going to touch this guy once, and and then in some ways that helped them with the ending, because that sort of explains to some degree why when he touched, Hank Hall, he did not see what they would ultimately reveal, right? So,
right. Yes, yeah. In fact, I talk about that elsewhere. That it's funny that he touches Superman 3 times, and most of the heroes he doesn't encounter again, except for the Flash. He meets in the Justice League Europe annual, and I talk about this when I get to that one. But he's like, I already touched you, Flash. I don't need to touch you again. And it makes for a funny bit in the story, but like you said, back when this came out, I was 21 when this came out. I was younger, and like you said, more accepting of them saying, well, here it is, and I just ate it all up. I didn't question it like I do. Now I'm 49. I'm looking back at this, and as I'm reading this, I'm questioning it a bit more. And there's things that's popping up now that I didn't even think twice about back then. Now I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So as I'm reading through this entire run, I'm not enjoying as much as I originally did, because again, I'm older and I'm asking more questions that I didn't ask back then. If I could just turn my mind off a little bit more and go with it more, it'd be a better run. But yeah, there are these lingering questions in my head that I'm asking myself, I'm asking the book, and I'm not getting the satisfactory answer I'd want. So, do you have any other thoughts on this issue?
The actual annual itself? No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we covered it. I mean, I think it's if you're really into dystopian like futures and you don't mind seeing the toys in your toy box get utterly disassembled and disemboweled, and with the knowledge that they will write everything by the end of the story. If that's something that you're into as a point of curiosity, then I think you will enjoy this annual. If you don't like seeing your favorite characters die horrible, violent, torturous deaths, you may just not like the content itself. But I mean, I think artistically and writing wise, it was all done very well. So for me, I recommend it. But I guess that's with the caveat of if you're not just into that type of storytelling, this may be a pass for you.
Yeah, very good. The one last thing I forgot to mention, I did like that last page where after Waverider takes off, Veril, I think we mentioned earlier a little bit that Veril in there, time and space under my control. All right, Faye, set up some robots so I can get rid of this junk. He's thinking about it for a minute. Time and space under my control.
He's like, maybe this time I can do it right.
That was like I say, it was a good story. I say if you value your characters too much and you get too attached to them, you may not want to read it. But otherwise, if you can just go with it, definitely a great annual. Well, I guess that's going to do it for this annual. Before we go, Derek, why don't you tell people out there where they can find you if they want to hear more about you?
Yeah, if you want to find me on the interwebs and you like listening to podcasts, and I assume you do if you're listening to this, I'm over on the Fanholes Podcast Network. You can find all the various podcasts I do over there on fanholespodcast.blogspot.com. I also do a chronological video series on YouTube called The History of Comics on Film. And you can find the videos from that over on HOCOF, short for History of Comics on Film.blogspot.com. And I always kind of forget to do this, but since we're talking about Legion, like I should probably pimp that I have a regular action figure feature over on the Legion of Super Bloggers. So if you're into this version of the Legion, I assume you may have some interest in the Legion of Superheroes. So go over there and check that out too.
Well, thank you, Rich. Again, thank you much for filling in and for joining me. Pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is fun to talk about something. Like I said to you earlier, it's not something I typically get a chance to talk about. So sometimes I feel like it's twisting arms to get a lot of Marvel type guys to talk about DC things. So and even within that context, I can't think of too many people that were among my colleagues that were super into the Legion or read as much Legion as I did. So
right.
This is fun, a fun type of topic and something that I don't normally get the chance to talk about. So thank you.
Well, no problem. We'll do this again sometime.
And to all my listeners, thank you for listening to us once again. Definitely let us know what you think. Let Derek know what you think about his involvement with this episode. Again, send me an email to head@headspeaks.com, or you can go onto Facebook or the website at head.headspeaks.com. Leave some comments. Let me know what you think. Go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from. Leave me a review. I would definitely love hearing from you guys. I haven't gotten any reviews or emails from you guys, so I'm not reading anything off right now. But I do want to thank you for listening in. And just a real quick note for next month. Instead of the first Tuesday of the month, I'm going to postpone next month until the third Tuesday of the month. The first Tuesday of the month, I should be out with an episode of Task Force X. Looking at my notes here, it looks like it'll be episode 45. And then the second week, I'll have my G.I. Joe as normal. The third week, I'll come out with Head Speaks. And then the fourth week, I'll be back with my Starman Manhunter Adventure Hour, plus an episode of Bravo Team. The reason for the change is that this next month, May, there's a big podcasting crossover thing that goes on called JLA May, where several of the podcasters get together and talk about some Just League story from the past. This year, they're going to be talking about Blackest Night, and I've been invited to be a part of it. So I'm going to be talking about Suicide Squad number 67, Secret 617, and issues 18 in Task Force X. And then I will be talking about the third week of the month on Head Speaks. I will be talking about the Blackest Night issue 4. The reason I switched these around is because the Suicide Squad and the Secret 6 books came out before the Blackest Night issue did. So check back with next month. First Tuesday of the month, I should have my Task Force X episode. But before you tune in here next month, actually Task Force X, so let's back a step. So I want you guys to check out Task Force X. Well, you should be listening to it anyways, but definitely check it out next month for May. But before you do, check out a podcast called The Podcast of OA, or OA, which looks at Blackest Night number 0. And from there, they'll direct you where I'm not sure who's doing Blackest Night 1 yet. Blackest Night 2 looks like is the Idol Head of Diablo. Blackest Night 3 is the Fire and Water podcast. And then be back here the third Tuesday of May for Blackest Night 4, where we will have Head Speaks. And we're looking at, like I say, Blackest Night number 4. And from there, we go on to other shows. We'll tell you more about that then. But definitely check out the Podcast of OA for the first parts, and they will lead you to other podcasts to listen to. And by this time next month, or hopefully by the first week of May, I should have a listing, and I should have that on the Task Force X page, and I'll probably also update it on the Head Speaks page, which order, where to go to find the other parts of this. There was 8 issues of The Blackest Night, but then there was a bunch of other crossover books. Like I say, Suicide Squad on my end was part of it. So definitely check that out. And let me know what you guys think. And I guess we'll see you next month. Until then, remember, Head has spoken. Thank you for listening to another fantastic episode of Head Speaks. Hope you enjoyed it. If so, let me know. Drop me an email to head@headspeaks.com or visit our home at head.headspeaks.com. You can also visit and talk with me on Facebook and Google+, both under Head Speaks. You can also send an MP3 file with your thoughts and I can play that on the air. And you can also get more of me on my other podcasts. Be sure to listen to Task Force X, where monthly I look at John Ossinger's Suicide Squad and Paul Kuppenberg's Checkmate comics from the 80s and early 90s. Also, over on G.I. Joe, A Real American Headcast, my podcasting friends Ryan Daly and Kyle Benning, along with myself, are looking at all of the G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero comics and related titles from Marvel and IDW. All of my headcasts are available on iTunes and Stitcher, along with the respective blogs and my main page at headspeaks.com. All comments, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Head Speaks are owned wholly by the speaker of said comments and do not express the opinions of Head Speaks, unless, of course, I'm the one making the comments. Head Speaks, Task Force X, and G.I. Joe, A Real American Headcast are all part of the Headcast family. So join us next month for another wonderful episode of Head Speaks. Until then, I'll see you in the funny pages. Good night.